I was born at Portsmouth, an English seaport town, principally remarkable for mud, Jews and sailors. My father holding in those days a situation under government in the Navy Pay Office.
That was how my great-great-grandfather described the city of his birth. I'm at the Round Tower, one of the fortifications built to protect Portsmouth from attack, which in the early 1800s was a real threat. The war against Napoleon and the French was still raging, and that made Portsmouth a boom town.
People were flocking to the town, and the pressure on accommodation was tremendous, pressure on all the services. So there would be lots of people, lots of activity in the street, ships being loaded, prize ships being brought into the harbour.
And the dockyard itself employs over 4,000 men. Yet you walk outside of the dockyard walls and conditions in many of the slums were as bad, if not worse, than you could possibly imagine.
So this is where Charles Dickens' father, John, that's my great-great-great-grandfather, started work at the Royal Navy Pay Office in 1807, where he was paid the sum of £110 a year for his efforts. The Dickens family first lived at number 13 Marlin Terrace. This is their rent book. They paid £35 a year.
The family was quite well-to-do, but not very high up the scale. This was a new house, and therefore it was obviously quite a suitable house for somebody of John Dickens' station.
They'd have looked out, there were cherry orchards, there was at least one windmill, and there would be a sort of a very low marshy area sloping down to the sea.
Today that view is very different. On the 7th of February 1812, Charles John Huffam Dickens was born. He was baptised in this font, now at St Albans Church in Cottenham. Soon after, the family moved to a cheaper property, number 16 Hawke Street. That house was destroyed in an air raid in 1941. John Dickens used to drink in the pub at the end of the road. The Dickens family moved one more time before leaving Portsmouth in 1815. Charles was nearly 3 years old. Of course, he went on to become the most prolific journalist, author, and social campaigner of the 19th century, famous the world over.
And he made people laugh, and he made people cry, and he showed people how indignant he was about social abuses, and the people of England knew he was on their side.
So Dickens wrote about Portsmouth in just one of his novels. It was Nicholas Nickleby. And Nicholas and Smike arrive in Portsmouth to join a group of touring actors. And they look for lodgings just outside the dockyard gate at a tobacconist, where they had to ascend 2 flights of stairs and a ladder.
They groped their way through a dark passage, threaded a little maze of canvas screens and paint pots, and emerged upon the stage of the Portsmouth Theatre.
Theatre was one of Dickens's passions. He loved performing and came back to Portsmouth to give dramatic readings of his stories, like Sykes and Nancy.
The murderer, staggering backwards towards the wall, grabbed a club and struck her down.
The last time was in 1866 at St George's Hall, which used to stand in the square. 4 years later, Dickens died at home in Kent. Cause of death? Apoplexy. Age, just 58.